subreddit, what are some scary scientific discoveries that most of the public is unaware of? Story 1. Supergonorrhea is resistant to the vast majority of strong antibiotics, including fluoroquinolones and macrolides, and gonorrhoea is mutating all the time to resist antibiotic effects. There have been multiple reports of supergonorrhea in Australia, England, etc. You probably have to have to get it, so most of us are safe. Story 2. Major solar coronal mass ejection apocalypse. The thinking goes that the big one, when it hits about once every 500 years, if not sooner, would be powerful enough to knock out electrical and communication systems across Earth for days, months, or even years, nixing power grids, satellites, GPS, the internet, telephones, transportation systems, banking, you name it. I think the biggest factor here would be the fact that nobody would know what happened. In a fear-fed world, this would lead to rumors and civil unrest very quickly. People running to get guns, food, taking advantage of the chaos to commit crimes, etc. It would be a nasty scenario. Oh yes. The most relevant recent incident was the Carrington event of 1859. The analog world of the time remarked that some telegraph operators were continuing to send and receive messages after disconnecting the device's power supplies. Today, the disruption would be catastrophic in highly unpredictable ways. For example, what would the results of a toxin pulse into the world environment be like after a billion small electrical fires ignite tons of plastic and solder? The total breakdown of the delivery network would instantly start the 6 weeks to starvation countdown. And then, there's the unfortunate fact that the vast majority of people, in my country at least, have no survival skills whatsoever, and the first thing they'll do for answers is reach for their non-functional phones. Motherfucking wall Martians will be barbecuing their neighbors within the week. You watch. Story 3. Many people may be silent carriers for mad cow disease and won't know for another decade or so. Mad cow disease from the 1980s to 1990s was due to cows being fed the remains of other animals. People then ate their beef and consumed prions, a protein that can destroy the human brain. It's thought that many people still might carry prions, but won't know until they start experiencing the symptoms of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which might be 10-50 years after consuming the contaminated meat. It has a long incubation period. You can also contract the prions from blood transfusions, which is why so many UK citizens from that time period still aren't allowed to donate blood. Once the symptoms begin, cognitive impairment, memory loss, hallucinations, etc., you usually die within months. There's no cure or treatment. My spouse knew a guy who died of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease last year. He was in his early 60s and had just retired. One day his eye began twitching. Not the eyelid, the eye itself, making it difficult for him to see well. Within 3 weeks, he was in a vegetative state. He died a short time later. Story 4. The replication crisis in psychology, though the problem occurs in many other fields too. Many studies aren't publishing sufficient information by which to conduct a replication study. Many studies play fast and loose with statistical analysis. Many times you're getting obvious cases of p-hacking or harking, hypothesis after results known, which are both big no-nos for reputable science. Story 5. Prions are so crazy. It's just a malformed protein, yet somehow it teaches other proteins to fold themselves improperly. The human body has no defense against it. Truly terrifying. Story 6. The world has 70% less insects on average than it did 40 years ago. We really are coming up on our silent spring. For the people saying there are less pests, those aren't the ones we're worried about. Insect pollinators are vital to so many crops. We could be facing serious problems with certain food supplies soon. In recent years, China has had issues with apple and pear crops to the point where some regions have had to pollinate crops by hand. Also, insects form lower blocks of many food webs, and their disappearance will spell trouble for higher trophic levels. Story 7. Abdominal aortic aneurysm. It's basically an aneurysm that happens in the big artery in the middle of the abdomen. It's fine and is usually asymptomatic, but when it ruptures, a patient loses all their blood within a short period of time. The scary part is that it usually is diagnosed by accident due to annual checkups for something else. Anyone can have the disease, but especially people with Marfan syndrome. Smoking, hypertensive, and hyperlipidemic. Yeah, my mom died from one about 9 years ago. She was 64 and went to the doctor with a persistent pain in her back and insisted on an x-ray and scan. They found a massive one, literally the words they wrote on the x-ray, and took her straight to hospital. She had one operation to get her ready for the stent procedure, and then it ruptured, and she died a couple of days before her op. The whole thing happened about 2 months after she retired. Otherwise, totally healthy and relatively clean living. Story 8. A known link between untreated hearing loss and cognitive decline, that is dementia, dementia, ETA. Keyword is untreated. If you previously had normal hearing and it started slipping, please see an ENT and audiologist. Hearing aids have come down in cost and improved in function, aesthetics, even in the last 10 years. If you are a veteran in the US, the VA will normally cover your hearing aids. If you have had hearing loss since childhood, you're not one of the ones I'm worried about. You have either learned sign language to keep you from being isolated due to your hearing loss, or you have learned how to use hearing aids/cochlear implants to keep you from being isolated due to your hearing loss. The link is really between communication and cognition, not the physical ability to hear. It's just that in people who previously had normal hearing, if they don't do anything, it will impair their communication and in turn affect their cognition. Story 9. First one, the vast overuse of antibiotics has led to superbugs that are antibiotic resistant. At the same time, the diversity of microbes within humans has dramatically decreased in first world countries. This leads to a correlated rise in allergies and gastrointestinal diseases. As we use more antibiotics and antibacterial viral products, then biodiversity of microbes decreases, and superbugs have a much easier pathway of invading the body. With a very biodiverse microbiome, your resident microbes will try to fight off these infections much easier. We need to focus on helping bacteria, not killing all of it. I am a biology undergraduate BTW, but I do work in a microbiology lab where I do genetic sequencing and study antibiotic production. I am no expert, but I am in love with microbiome research. For anyone else curious about the subject, I recommend I Contain Multitudes by Ed Yong. It covers the subject across the animal kingdom, and it's actually really fun to read. Story 10, not a scientist, but recently discovered that the rate of which people in my country will get cancer has reached 1 out of 2 people, or basically half the population will be diagnosed with some form of cancer in their lifetime. No one believes me that it's that high when I tell them that, even if I show the actual reports I got this information from. Story 11, source. My professor on concrete cement structures, I'm from Malaga, Spain. It's not a terribly seismic active place, however, every 100 years or so there's kind of a big earthquake according to historical records. We didn't have it so far, although it'd be about time. During the last 100 years we've been building taller buildings than ever, but the law requirements for buildings weren't up to date in order to resist that sort of big earthquake. Basically, there's a huge batch of buildings waiting to collapse under this earthquake, and the issue is mostly ignored. It's one of those low-risk scenarios with a huge bill to fix associated with them. Fortunately, new buildings are supposed to be prepared for anything you throw at them. Story 12, not a scientist, but I will still take the time to mention something that scares the out of me I only found about a month ago, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of, but probably should be. Back in 1946 to 58, the US tested 60 nuclear weapons on the Marshall Islands and buried the nuclear leftover waste in soil in a 30 feet deep cavern, sealing it with a concrete dome. The dome is cracking, and now it's leaking into the ocean, and surprise, surprise, it's not fixing itself, and the people responsible are essentially ignoring it or saying it is not their problem. Imagine Chernobyl, but bigger and in the ocean. Story 13. About 8 years ago, a friend of mine was working on the technology to allow you to feel things through your smartphone. Not just the emotion of anger that you feel every day through Twitter, but the textures of fabrics of clothing you are thinking about buying. He moved to Boston and we lost touch, but I think about his job every single week. Story 15. Ants are attracted to, and when you on the kitchen floor, the ants will prefer the nut over the other stuff, making it perfect for keeping ants away from your food. You know, I'm somewhat of a scientist myself. Story 16, plants can scream. Story 17, pineapples have an enzyme that digests protein, so whenever you eat a pineapple, it is eating you back. Story 18, the star. Betelgeuse in Orion may be about to go supernova. We've known it's going to go supernova soon. That's astronomy as soon as it could be tomorrow or in 200 years. Betelgeuse is a variable star, so it gets brighter or dimmer all the time, but it just got dimmer than we've ever seen it before. No one's 100% what's going on. If Betelgeuse does go supernova, all of our satellites and stuff will be fine. The solar wind will protect us. The main problem is we'll have no night for a while, maybe weeks, so it'll really throw animals off. Story 19. With the way we're going, coral reefs won't be gone in like 15, 20 years. They'll be completely gone in 5, which is extremely detrimental to the sea, as the reefs are one of the most biodiverse places we have on the planet. Not my area of science, but important nonetheless. Story 20. The Higgs boson, which was hypothesized decades ago, was discovered via the Large Hadron Collider. Its real-life discovery proved that it's what gives mass to everything. But there is a non-zero chance that a Higgs boson can drop to a lower energy state, and because of the law of entropy, it's the preferred state to decay to a lower energy state if possible. The influence of a low energy state, boson, would kick off a chain reaction, causing other Higgs bosons bosons to drop to a lower energy state. The problem with this is that if a Higgs boson drops to a lower energy state, then it can't give mass to things anymore, which has universal implications when mass doesn't have mass anymore. It's theorized that the infinitesimal small probability of this occurring could lead to a circumstance where the universe as we know it disappears. Essentially, it would occur like an absolute void, progressing through the universe. Low-energy state Higgs bosons infecting any other Higgs boson they come across. Maybe the closest thing to a Thanos snap, but it causes everything to disappear in the universe, but only at the speed of light rather than instantaneously. Story 21. There are ancient microbes lying dormant in glaciers. As climate change progresses and these glaciers melt, it is possible that we will be exposed to ancient diseases, for which we will have no immunity. Story 22. The fact that you can edit genes from the comfort of your home. The protocols are out there, the literature is too, the materials are easy to obtain. Asia has a lot of unregulated production of anything biochemistry related. It's where I get my phytohormones. This means that a kid with some free time, roughly $5,000 and a heap of motivation could potentially create something world-threatening. It might not work on the first 100 tries, and you can try 100 times within a week, but once it does, there's no stopping it. I know for a fact that not a single country in the world has developed a working protocol for a shutdown or containment. Roughly a year ago, I informed someone working in the anti-terror division about this. I said that I modified brewer's yeast by cold shocking it in a suspension with wild-type yeast DNA to make some new craft beers, and that anyone could do that, not just to yeast, but to a whole lot of microorganisms. I was asked to come and give a lecture about this so that the AT team would have a clue about how biochemical warfare could potentially be prevented, contained, but I never heard from them again. What's scary is that this is not a discovery. This is out there. This is happening on a large scale to do good, and people justify it because of that. It's being used to clean up oil spills, to produce medicines like insulin, even to capture CO2 from the air and convert it to bioavailable molecules, putting vitamin A in rice. But it takes just one rotten apple to spoil the world. Bill Gates has spoken out about this, and I think more people in the world should. We can't stop this from happening, but we can have the right protocols in place to contain it. As soon as I think about what's needed to contain something like that, and to stop people from fleeing contained sites, well, you've seen the movies. The thing is, where do people go once they're infected? Right to the hospital, where there's a bunch of people with already weakened immune systems. Where do most antibiotic-resistant bacteria get their resistance? Right in hospitals through horizontal gene transfers. A hospital-sized petri dish. Story 23. Our immune system is very amazing at what it does, but it is also super dangerous. B cells and T cells have the potential of being very self-reactive. They can slip past cells that are supposed to kill self-reactive immune cells, and they can cause autoimmunity. To help combat autoimmunity in super important parts of the body, eyes, genitalia, brain, etc., then these areas become immune privileged. Basically, immune cells can't go in those areas at all. One of the most terrifying things is infections using those immune privileged sites to their advantage. In Ebola survivors, the virus can hide in those sites and reinfect the patient later on. In one case, Ebola was in the eye of a survivor and caused his eye to change color. In other cases, Ebola was transferred as an STD because it was hiding in the genitalia of a survivor who transferred to their sexual partner. Story 24. That there's an entire planet in our solar system that we can't find. The only piece of evidence to its existence is that certain celestial bodies' orbits and movements and stuff are behaving erratically. And the logical explanation is that there's another planet out. If I remember correctly, it's also around the size of Neptune. Story 25. The climate change thing is simultaneously overstated and understated. Life on Earth will not end in 10 years. No credible scientist ever claimed this. But we are in the midst of a serious loss in biodiversity and biomass. And those are not things that can be restored quickly or easily. Climate changes, but it is not supposed to change this much this quickly. And it's such a complicated system. Humanity's relationship with global ecology is fundamentally unsustainable and will undergo radical alterations in the next century, whether we intend it to or not. That's the threat we face, no more and no less. Story 26, and I'd say the supervolcano under Yellowstone that could literally go off today and wipe out millions. It's been due to erupt for a while now, and it's thought the last time it erupted, it brought on the Ice Age. Story 27, bacteria that can survive space and re-entry into the atmosphere. Aliens are real, bro. Story 28, STDs such as herpes, which can't be cured, can be contracted with skin contact as well. Nothing sexual, and most interesting, 1 out of 6 have it, and people don't know. Thirdly, neonatal herpes can get your just-born child killed, so take good care and get checkups. Story 29. Naegleria fowleri is an amoeba that usually lives in the sediments of lakes and eats bacteria. However, when a swimmer happens to inhale some water through their nose that contains amoebae, the amoebae can enter the brain. This can cause a fatal brain disease where you progressively lose balance, your sense of smell changes, you start to hallucinate, and you begin to have seizures. You can also contract this disease from using non-sterile tap water for neti pots. Story 30. I have a few. Vacuum decay. Do you know how batteries die, how a cold beverage will heat over time, or how everything you put into motion will eventually stop? That's because of entropy. Matter doesn't like to have a lot of energy. It always wants to reach the lowest possible state of energy. You know, the bottom of the graph. The universe is doing that right now everywhere. There's this hypothesis that our current lowest possible state might not be real, just sitting close to a bump that'll end in an even lower state. And particles could be just some quantum tunneling away from reaching it. But why is this important? Because if that ever happens, it'd create a cascade effect moving through space that would destroy everything it touches, potentially replacing it with new laws of physics, because the constants would change. And we wouldn't know until it's too late. Strange matter, with an effect not unlike vacuum decay, this time caused by a compression of particles in the core of neutron stars to the point of fusing regular quarks, up, down, etc., into strange quarks that some physicists hypothesize could be more stable than regular quarks. Again, creates a cascade turning everything it touches into strange matter, for which we don't yet know the properties of. Supernovae and gamma-ray bursts. Any supernova closer than 1,000 light-years could damage Earth's atmosphere. Gamma-ray bursts are even faster and more dangerous. It's estimated that there are more than 3 million stars within 1,000 light-years of the solar system. Human impact on the climate. It's already past the point of no return. We probably won't get extinct, from this at least. But the next decades will be harsh for all of our planet's biomes. Biologists are calling it the sixth mass extinction, or Anthropocene extinction, because we're the ones causing it, as the current rate of species vanishing is already 100 to 1,000 times the normal. This number is only set to increase as the climate becomes more extreme. Space is really, really big. It's hard to find stuff. Stellar black holes are really small and can't be detected if they're not interacting with anything. Some models suggest that there could be tens of thousands of black holes hiding in our galaxy. Blue ice. It's the name given to the frozen sewage material that is leaked mid-flight from commercial aircraft lavatory waste systems. If it falls, it can damage roofs or even you. So yeah, you can be walking on the street one moment and in the next die, impaled by frozen pee.